Imagine a time when spilling blood for power was commonplace, where battles for the throne turned family against family. But England's history holds one secret that has remained silent for centuries, haunting the winds, growing deeper with each passing day. Two innocent princes, who vanished one night. No one heard their cries. Their bodies were never found. And who was responsible for their deaths? Was it a tyranny born of lust for power, or a conspiracy whose faces still hide behind the pages of history? This is the story of those two young princes, Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, who disappeared behind the high walls of the Tower of London. Their vanishing was not just a mystery, but a puzzle that became an eternal stain on England's royal family. And perhaps you cannot even imagine what historical alleys we must traverse to unravel this mystery and what truths will emerge. The mystery begins in 1483, a turbulent period in English history known as the Wars of the Roses. Two powerful families, the House of Lancaster, represented by the Red Rose, and the House of York, the White Rose, had been battling for the throne for decades. It was a time of shifting loyalties, political intrigue, and brutal violence. Edward IV, a king from the House of York, had managed to secure the throne and bring a semblance of peace. He had two young sons, Edward V, the rightful heir to the throne, a boy of just 12 years old, and his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, who was only 9. Their mother was Queen Elizabeth Woodville, a woman of common birth whose marriage to the king had caused much controversy among the noble families. King Edward IV died unexpectedly in April 1983, leaving behind his young sons and a kingdom on the brink. The elder son, Edward V, was immediately proclaimed king. However, his ascension was quickly overshadowed by his powerful uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, King Edward IV's younger brother. Richard the Duke of Gloucester was appointed Lord Protector of his young nephew, King Edward V. This was a traditional role, meant to guide the young king until he came of age. However, Richard's actions quickly raised suspicions. He intercepted young King Edward V en route to London, took control of his person, and gradually isolated him from his loyal supporters. Soon after, Edward V was escorted to the formidable Tower of London, ostensibly for his safety and protection before his coronation. It was common practice for monarchs to stay in the tower before their coronation, but this stay would prove to be tragically different. Within weeks, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, convinced the Queen Dowager, Elizabeth Woodville, that her younger son, Richard, Duke of York, should also join his brother in the tower. The Queen, perhaps fearful for her son's safety outside the tower, reluctantly agreed, and so the boys, the young king and his brother, were reunited within the cold stone walls of the Tower of London in June 1483. This was the last time they were seen by many outside the tower. By June 1483, whispers began to circulate. The young King Edward V's coronation was repeatedly postponed. The Italian chronicler Dominic Mancini, who was in London at the time, reported that the boys were increasingly secluded. Their attendants were removed, and they were seen less and less. The last recorded public sighting of the princes was around mid-June, playing in the Tower Garden. After that, they simply vanished from public view. Richard the Duke of Gloucester now made his move. He declared the princes illegitimate, based on a controversial claim that his brother, King Edward IV, had pre-contracted to marry another woman before Elizabeth Woodville. This rendered his marriage to Elizabeth invalid, and their children illegitimate, thereby removing the prince's claim to the throne. On July 6, 1483, Richard the Duke of Gloucester was crowned King Richard III. The boys in the tower were never seen again. Their disappearance became England's most haunting unsolved mystery. For centuries, King Richard III has remained the prime suspect in the murder of the princes in the tower. The most damning evidence against him comes from Sir Thomas More's History of King Richard III, written decades later. More's account, though possibly influenced by Richard's enemies, described the murders in chilling detail. According to More, Richard ordered Sir James Tyrrell to chill the boys. Tyrrell in turn allegedly tasked Miles Forrest and John Dighton with the deed. They supposedly smothered the children in their beds with pillows and feather beds. Their bodies were reportedly buried secretly beneath a staircase in the tower,
only to be later exhumed and reburied in an unmarked grave. Richard III had the motive. The princes were the only obstacle to his claim to the throne. Their existence, legitimate or not, posed a constant threat. However, supporters of Richard III argue that he gained nothing from their visible disappearance and that he might have been framed. They point to the fact that he was already king, and their survival would have been a political liability, but their outright murder would have been a public relations disaster. Despite Richard III being the most popular suspect, other theories persist. Henry VII. Richard III's successor, Henry the Tudor, later King Henry VII, who won the throne at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1885. Henry Tudor also had a strong motive to eliminate any potential Yorkist claimants to the throne, including the princes. He never launched a thorough investigation into their disappearance, and some historians suggest he might have been responsible. Margaret Beaufort, Henry VII's formidable mother, known for her political ambition. Some believe she might have orchestrated their deaths to secure her son's claim to the throne. The survival theory, a less popular theory, suggests the princes were not murdered but smuggled out of the tower and lived under assumed identities. This theory gained traction with the emergence of pretenders like Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be Richard the Duke of York years later. However, historical evidence largely debunks these claims. The most tangible evidence linked to the princes came centuries later. In 1674, during renovations at the Tower of London, workmen discovered a wooden chest containing the skeletons of 2 children buried beneath a staircase. King Charles II ordered the remains to be placed in Westminster Abbey, believing them to be the lost princes. In 1933, the remains were examined by experts. They confirmed the skeletons belonged to 2 children, aged approximately 12 and 9, consistent with the ages of Edward V and Richard. However, definitive identification was impossible with the technology available at the time. Requests to re-examine the bones using modern DNA technology have consistently been denied by the royal family, adding another layer to the enduring mystery. The disappearance of the princes in the Tower remains one of England's greatest unsolved mysteries. It has inspired countless books,